Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got a very interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the Les George VECP button lock. Oh boy. What a great idea. Let me tell you. Oh, he did such a good job with this. This knife is made in the USA, and I'm going to break a bunch of hearts here, but it's going to be super duper hard to get. It was already that way before I posted this video, right? I am a huge fan of Les George. I am a gigantic fan of the VECP. In fact, I have one. It is a regular user of mine, but that's a titanium frame lock. The design of the VECP, this is now the current version is the version 3. But the design of the VECP has been the same for a very long time, and it works, right? It's got a couple of quirks, but this is the same thing with a button lock. But to my surprise, the execution of this was just really, really good. This was picked up at a knife show by the gentleman who actually sent this knife. I believe his name is Roger. He picked this up at a knife show directly from Les George back in, no, I'm sorry. His name is Jason. Sorry about that. But he picked this up at a knife show. I think he said it was Nashville Custom Knife Show in November of 2022. So it's a fairly recent model, probably a good, pretty good example of what they're going to be like. I have seen listings for this knife at a few different retailers, which means they have dropped. But if you're familiar with the VECP and Les George knives in general, when these knives drop, VEC or the button lock or whatever, it's a small batch and then you don't see them for a really long time. So it's one of those things you kind of have to follow Les George or follow various retailers to be aware of when these things are going to drop. That's just going to be the way that it is. Thanks so much again to the gentleman who sent this in for me to take a look at it. We'll go back to him when I'm done. I don't get to keep it. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me, and please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Go ahead and get a measurement. We're going to rush through specs here because it's largely the same thing. Overall length is about 8.3 inches overall. Blade length is 3.5 inches. Cutting edge is 3.25. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. So it is definitely a full-size knife. How about up against the Demco AD 20.5? There we go. Let's put it up against the Spyderco Para 3. I'm sorry, the PM2 and the Para 3. It's almost exactly the same length overall as the Spyderco PM2. We are at an angle here, so it looks a little bit bigger. But yeah, almost exactly the same. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Reptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Benchmade Bug Out. How's the action? That's a big point I've got to make here. Slide stick off the button. I'm not really concerned with that because I think the button is well done. If you're wondering what this is on the other side, it's non-functional. It's just housing for that piston lock. The button itself has minimal travel and good lockup. It's very minimal stick. You can see the action here is exactly what you want from a button lock. Falls shut. But here's the kicker. It's on freaking phosphor bronze washers. Holy crap. Now my VECP is very smooth. I've always said that the VECP is what happens when you mix like the Sebenza and the Hinderer XM18 together. You get smoother washer action, but you get more of that tactical sort of XM18 kind of look. This is ridiculous. Ridiculous. It's very, very smooth. But the other thing is that it's so snappy. I mean, I can easily reverse flick this thing, and everything is so solid. Look at this. It's got a nice, well, when I'm not pushing the button, right? But the snap into the close position has that nice metallic sort of click, right? The snap into the lock out position, which by the way is completely solid, pretty robust in there. Everything's pretty robust. Yeah, this is really, really good. It's not quite as smooth as something that's running on bearings, but oh my God, good enough, right? A lot of people, this always cracks me up. Listen, if you have ever said, and don't worry, you don't have to raise your hand and go, yep, I said that dumb thing one time. If you're one of those people that thinks that premium knives only run on bearings, That is a silly, ridiculous thought that bearings somehow make the price like, oh, it's multiple hundreds of dollars, probably because it's on bearings. That's such a tiny little bit to do, right? Bearings themselves, obviously, there are really expensive knives that run on multi-row, hardened ceramic, this or that, blah, blah, blah. But bearings by themselves do not make knives more expensive. That's generally something that accentuates or helps out the action of certain designs. But there are many, many variables. It's not black and white. It's not static. Bearings equals expensive, and washers are only for basic. That's not how that works. It depends on the design. Typically, generally speaking, knives that run on phosphor bronze washers, there's nylon, phosphor bronze, bearings, right? There's some other settings. Nylon, you get really smooth action, but that's not the most durable setup on the inside of the pivot. So if you work in sort of like a dusty, dirty, grainy environment, there's a chance that debris could actually ruin those washers. Phosphor bronze, that eliminates that issue, right? Sacrifice, generally speaking, some smoothness in the action. It's usually not quite as smooth as nylon, nowhere near as smooth as bearings, but it's basically impenetrable. You're not going to get dirt and debris inside the pivot, which is why people who are hardcore knife users prefer phosphor bronze washers. They don't care about the action, right? Bearings, usually, generally, the best action. And that's for people who just really like it to be smooth so they can sit there and flick it out. And, I get it. I'm somebody like that too. But it's rare, but it can cause an issue in a dirty or dusty environment. When people can get this type of action with phosphor bronze and have perfect lockup solidity, that's rare. This is nearly what you experience with a knife running on bearings, which they do make versions of the VECP on bearings. Nearly that, but with perfect lockup solidity and impenetrable to dirt and debris. That's pretty epic. I will pay way more for that, right? So if you think that because this knife is running on phosphor bronze that that the price tag's not justified, that is. I'm sorry. I mean, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but I'm going to take that opinion and dismiss it aggressively. This is a much better setup. This is a very, very impressive setup. And honestly, I think it makes that price tag, which again is there because of many, many other elements, it makes it that much more justifiable. We're just getting started here with this knife, but I just wanted to take some time to rant about that because I've seen that silly take before. Let's go ahead and do carry profile thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. It's a little bit thicker than the Para 3. I mean, it's still going to be the same as the, in fact, I can get out, probably would be a better comparison to put it up against the actual frame lock version of the VECP. So this is mine. You can see here, it is essentially the exact same thing. This way, right? Slight difference in terms of, no, not even. Maybe slight difference in terms of like this area here. It looks like maybe it's a little bit longer. I think there's subtle changes here and there. Distance between the thumb stud and the top is absolutely different. So it looks like he lowered the position of the thumb stud. If we go pivot to pivot here, you can see that the thumb studs are actually lower. And so is the cut behind the stud there, which is interesting. That means that the thumb stud is... it's about the same. That's weird. This is interesting how he did this. But there are little changes there, definitely. So it's a good thing we got these out. Blade stock thickness is about the same. You can see here that this part of the blade doesn't come up nearly as high. And maybe that's to accommodate probably the new position of the stop pin relative to where they had to put that's exactly why. The stop pin used to be lower. So there you go. That's why. Bottom of the knife looks to be about the same. Back here, it looks like the standoffs in the button lock are a little bit smaller and they're positioned slightly differently. We still have the lanyard hole in the worst spot possible, but okay. It's not like Les George is like, oh, please, Metal Complex, tell me how to be successful with the design. The design's already successful, right? It doesn't need my help. But yeah, so there you go. Thickness appears to be exact. In fact, actually, that's not true. The button lock version is it slightly thicker? It is. So I'm putting these level on my thumb. Just a hair thicker. I can feel it. It's just a hair thicker than the old one. Interesting. Okay. Carry profile up against the PM2 and Para 3. Where did they go? Here's the PM2. What a sloppy review. I have no idea what happened to the Para 3, so we'll just put it up against the Ritter Hogue. But you can see here that this is going to carry similarly to each of these knives, right? So it's still a large knife. If you've been carrying a PM2, probably not going to be as much of a problem. Let's go ahead and weigh it. I'd like to see the difference in weight. There's the pair of 3. I'd like to see the difference in weight between the new button lock version and the old frame lock version. So on the inside here, we are looking at no internal milling. And I believe, that is the case. No, these guys actually have, these newer ones have internal milling. I forgot about that. So this button lock version, which maybe in the future we'll see a version of it with milling, weighs 5.08 ounces. Not terrible, but definitely on the heavier side. And this one, for it weighs more, even though it has internal. How is that possible? The button lock one, I'm wrong. I'm an idiot. This has milling. Stupid. Stupid me. This has milling. All right. Please excuse my dumb baby brain. It's got milling. It weighs very close to the original, right? There you go. Materials. What are we looking at for materials? Titanium and Magna Cut. Wow. That's cool. Very happy to see that. That was a nice little cherry on top. We've seen 204P. We've seen CTS XHP, which is what mine is in. The flippers that run on bearings are generally the 204P. I am a huge fan of CTS XHP. That is essentially stainless CPM D2, which adds a whole nother layer of awesomeness to that steel. So really happy with that. But Magna Cut, super duper stainless, great edge retention, reasonable toughness. Reports are that it's harder to sharpen than I think people originally realized, but hey, it's the new spicy thing, right? That's cool that he's using Magna Cut, and it's really cool to see it on the button lock. I will go ahead and get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are, if I can actually find them, there they are. My tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. We're going to go with a T20 for the pivot. I believe that's the case. Yeah. Good old Les George. That's a freaking T20 pivot. And then, oddly enough, I think these are actually smaller. So the old ones on mine, I think they're T10. But I think the new one is a T8. And that's fine if it is. Okay, so we'll check it here. Yeah, on the old one, it's a T10. These guys are not. They're going to be a T8. And we'll check that just to be sure, so we know. Right? So these are going to be T8. The other change is that we now have them heads on either side, which is probably why the standoffs are a little different. These went all the way through and just went into the titanium. Some people see that as an upgrade. Some people, like me, don't really care. But it's fine. We have minimal hardware. There's just 2 heads on each side. We've got T8, and we have a gigantic, easy-to-adjust T20 pivot. That's just fine. Even with this being a plunge lock, it's not going to be that difficult to take apart. Blade stock thickness. I'm going to guess it's the same as it has been. I think they've always been about 155,000. So let's take a look. 150. Is that the same way as the other one? Let's take a look here with the old one. This is coming in slide. It says 147. So they're about the same. So there you go. All right. Meat and potatoes time. It's the same VECP that I'm going to assume we all know and love. This is definitely a famous model. If you're not familiar with it, Les George is right there in the same tier as Chris Reeve, Rick Hinderer, Demko, right? A lot of people argue that Les George is more deserving of a spot in the original Holy Trinity than Mick Strider. The original Holy Trinity, a lot of people argue about this. It's the original Holy Trinity factually, you can have your own Holy Trinity if you want, but the original, when you hear about this referred to on the forums back in the old days, it's Mick Strider, Rick Hinderer, and Chris Reeve, right? They're the 3 different corners of these American, super high quality premium folding knives, production folding knives. A lot of people argue that Les George deserves a spot in there, or that it should be it should be a quadrology, right? But people argue about Demko and Medford too. Whatever, it's all out the window now. In my experience, Les George makes just as high quality a knife as Rick Hinderer or Chris Reeve. I think better quality than Strider, especially for the money. And this is another example of that. This design is wonderful ergonomically. I love this thing. The pocket clip still has kind of a bill. It's got a little bit too aggressive of a rise, but it does work. It is very simple. It's a super duper simple clip, and I don't like how it's mounted. It's mounted below the lanyard hole for some reason, but we still have reasonable carry depth. It's still teetering on medium, between medium and shallow, but it's okay. I never really had a problem carrying this. I still don't have a problem carrying mine. It's fine. I just wish the clip was a little bit different. Ergonomically, though, my goodness, this is just a joy. You're quite a ways from the cutting edge, and the thumb studs are slightly in the cutting path, but still, the lock-in and just the comfort that you'll get with this thing is fantastic. The jimping on this new one is a little better than the jimping on the old one. And on this guy, the jimping is almost decorative. It's almost just barely functional. This is a little bit more, but it's still kind of slippery. These ledges are almost too knocked down. I think there should be more of them, and they should be slightly sharper, but you can lock in there. You can technically choke up on this, but it's not super duper comfortable. Really, the main joy of using this knife comes in the blade. This is a drop point blade, classic drop point blade. It does get reasonably thin behind the edge, but man, the finish on this blade, I've always talked about this. There's something different about these knives. It has a glassy, smooth finish. It is so ridiculously smooth. Same on the titanium. It just feels different. I don't know what it is that he's doing. It's got a nice polish on it, but the tumble marks are, they're deep enough and consistent enough that, these knives just wear really well over time. I mean, this one is a reasonably heavy user, and a lot of people are going to contest that. They're going to say, oh, it's not covered in grass clippings and mud and dirt and spit, and it's not rusting, so he's not using it, right? Well, spoiler alert. It's not even, that's the wrong thing to say there. But surprise, I clean my knives off after I use them, right? Even the Rockstead with a broken tip, right? That people have seen me cut open aluminum cans on live streams, right? It just gets cleaned off because because that's what you do. After you use a knife, you clean it off unless you want it to fall apart super fast. But yeah, consistent use with these, that's why I like this clean, tumbled look, is it just wears really well over time. It looks good. So that's nice to see that nothing has changed. I also like the style of his thumb studs. They're large enough that they're easy to find, and the texturing, the chamfering is sharp enough that it catches your finger, but not so sharp that it's irritating, right? They're also in a really, really nice spot, and it is very, very easy and satisfying to use them, to kick the blade out, right? I really like the look. It is, a lot of people say it's really, really basic, but hey, it's been the same forever. They do make versions of these. I don't know about the button locks, but I'm sure it'll be the same way as the other VECPs. That he does some milling on them periodically. I know Monkey Edge still periodically does a frag pattern on these. The flippers that run on bearings have wild, different texturing designs. I'm hoping that he offers that on these as well. I think that'd be really cool. But the flat titanium look is fine. I think it's a little boring, but it's fine. I mean, this is just a big open canvas opportunity to do some texturing, give it a little more character. But it's such a classic look. People recognize this knife for the plain Jane aesthetic that it's almost like, if you texture it, it takes away from that for some people. So it's one of those things that's going to come down to preference, right? The cutting edge is done extremely well, and it is factory edge on this is super great. And that's the case with mine as well. It's an absolute joy to use. It does taper down to a nice pointy tip. Really, the blade is just fantastic. On one side, it says George and MagnaCut. On the other side, nothing, right? Let's see here. We do, by the way, fit and finish is perfect. Les George, these knives are truly made in the United States, the same way that Chris Reeve and Rick Hinder knives are truly made in the United States. There's no, well, it's kind of this or that. No, these are USA, which is why they cost so much. If you're thinking, I've bought so-and-so said that their knives were USA and it only cost me $80. That's because it's probably not really made in the USA, or at least a huge chunk of it is not, right? Just enough for them to say made in the USA. These are premium tolerances, premium materials, And it's truly, all this stuff is truly being made in the United States, small batch. And I don't think Les George commands like a huge army of people making these things. They are small batch, right? All elements, whether you want to consider them or not, all elements that will lead to a high price tag. But the nice thing is that he's still being competitive. We'll talk more about that here in a sec. No backspacer, no milled clip. We see this a lot. You know, it's like the Chris Reeve knives it's titanium, but it's not milled, right? It's just stamped. Same with the Hinderer knives. Same with the Demco knives, right? Strider knives. Medford, I think, is one of the only ones that does a milled clip, but his prices tend to be quite a bit higher. So this is still doing the same thing. It would have been nice to see, you know, the Backspacer. I think he does offer various, you know, options for clips, and I want to say that there was an option for a backspacer, a milled backspacer on his website a while back, or different colors of standoffs, and that's fine if you want to pay a little money. But we're just getting basic stuff back here, nothing special, you know, with the clip or the standoffs. In and out of the pocket, this is a breeze. That's the one nice thing about having a bill like that. It's bothersome, you know, to see it rise so much. At least there's no hook. You know, it comes up and stops, and that's good. It doesn't come up and over like what Civivi does with their clips. That drives me nuts. Still a bit grabby, but in and out of the pocket, this thing is an absolute breeze. There's no texturing on the titanium, and it's flat, right? Decent retention, but not enough that it's going to, you know, pinch too hard. This is an absolute breeze to get in and out of the pocket. Stop pin is located back here. There's a little bit of shouldering. Lockup is completely solid. I mean it. It's just completely solid. Minimal. Just a little bit of stick. Just a little bit. Very smooth and consistent in here. Feels like washer action. You push that button all the way down and the blade really just does fall right down into the handle. Just a little bit. But it's so really impressive for being on phosphor bronze. There is no pivot lash whatsoever. Consistent in here, and then we have kind of a thud, kind of a click into the closed position, and we are centered, which is really great with no detent lash. Really, really great. What's the price? It's probably more, right? The VECP has always been, I mean, for a long time it was $400, and then he bumped it slightly to $425 like 5 years ago or whenever. So this new one's probably like $500 or so, right? No, it's $425. Keeping that, he's got the price the same. I saw it listed on 2 different retailers, $425. There's a whole bunch of people are going to just be mad at that, right? I can get titanium and MagnaCut or titanium and M390 through this company for $200. Yeah, because it's made in China, right? Or if it's not, then a huge chunk of it is not made in the United States. That's just going to be the case. A lot of people love to think that there's all these people out to get them, that everything's overpriced and everybody's ripping everybody's faces off, and they see through it because they're a smart consumer. There's other elements at play that you're not considering. Probably elements that you've been told about and you just don't want to, you know, there's just people that just don't want to accept it. The truth is that these Les George VECP knives have, you know, they've been this price forever, right? The fact that it's still this price is amazing. And we got a button lock now in MagnaCut, and we're still at $425, right? Yeah. If you're into small batch, truly USA produced premium production knives, the Les George VECP has probably been on your radar for a long time. Maybe you already own one, right? This is the most exciting button lock that I have handled in a long time. I was pumped when I saw that he was doing a button lock. This makes me want a button lock Hinderer XM18. That's cool that they did the, the automatic, but it just makes me, Hinderer, make a button lock XM18, right? The VECP works beautifully. It's awesome. This is amazing. I wish that he'd change the clip, and I wish that he'd just get rid of the lanyard hole or put it somewhere else, right? But, small potatoes. This is amazing. Obviously, this is not going to be a knife for everybody because of the price tag. You have to really, really like that USA thing. You have to really, really, want that small batch, true USA, production quality. And maybe just be a fan of the VECP. But the VECP is an excellent design. It's incredible. I love this knife. If you can get your hands on a button lock version of this knife, I do recommend it. This is a recommendable knife. It's just, it's definitely on the pricier side. It's not going to appeal to everybody, but this is really, really cool, and I love it. I am blown away by the quality of this thing. That's going to be pretty much it. Thanks again to the gentleman who sent this in. This will go on my most recommended knives playlist. It's also going to go on my favorite knives of all time playlist because this is absolutely one of my favorite knives of all time. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.